All right, well, things continue to be in decline for Ubisoft, not just because their stocks are tanking like record low, but because they're now caught red-handed trying to influence and butter up these YouTubers and social media influencers in order to garner some sort of, fake positive narrative, some sort of fake excitement for Star Wars Outlaws, a game that never needed to be made, a game that most people probably aren't excited about. Where they've just taken essentially a gender-swapped Han Solo, they've made Ma'am Solo out of her, taken a beautiful, motion capture model and voice actress and made her less than appealing, we'll say. I don't think she's like the most hideous character ever, but definitely not as attractive as she could have been, downplaying her looks. And of course, we've seen the janky gameplay from this game, we've seen all sorts of problems with the pricing model and everything else, and of course, we've now seen the really bad, buggy gameplay, where the AI is just completely brain dead. So on top of all these issues, they're now caught red-handed trying to essentially garner some sort of positive opinion for this game to create more of a buzz about it than there really is. Now we got to get back to the bigger issue at hand, because remember, this game comes out at the end of the month. But the bigger, I would say the much larger issue for Ubisoft is their involvement and the way that they're marketing Assassin's Creed Shadows, which remember, just about a week ago, there was a Reddit, the official Reddit for the game started banning people who have anything bad to say about the potential historical inaccuracies of their protagonist, Yasuke. Now remember, this entire Yasuke situation was created by a man named Thomas Lockley, who wrote a book where he then tried to claim that it was historical fiction or historical facts were in the book to support his character or his story. Then he was caught red-handed editing Wikipedia articles in order to use himself as a source to create the narrative that his book was based on history. It's just a gigantic mess. So there was a Japanese historian who came out and said, oh no, this guy was definitely a samurai. This guy, Hiramata, I believe his name was. But again, Hirayama. Yu Hirayama was the Japanese historian. But again, the reality is he is just using his opinion as fact. He's actually coming out and said, well, this is just the way I interpret this. I don't have any proof that he was a samurai, but you could interpret this as X, Y, or Z. So we've even, had mainstream media sites coming out and saying, well, yeah, Thomas Lockley, he wrote a book of fiction. It wasn't supposed to be meant as fact, So, of course, everyone's jumped on this and they're like, hey, what's going on here? We've even seen the Japanese Diet, their legislative body, coming out and saying, we're going to investigate this because you guys are trying to erase our history. So now what we have today is another Japanese historian, Yuichi Goza, speculating that that Yasuke was simply Oda Nobunaga's bodyguard and entertainer rather than a samurai as he's depicted in Assassin's Creed Shadows. And this is a That Park Place article from John Trent. And I think this is definitely a much more reasonable approach to the character, to the historical person who was Yasuke, given the fact that, again, there's no real supporting argument that he was a samurai, but it would make a lot more sense that if he came with the Jesuits as let's just say a slave or as somebody who's more of an indentured servant, he would have been treated as property, even, I would suspect, by the Japanese at that point, who looked at him as, not one of them. Remember, the Japanese were definitely very ethnocentric at the time, even still to this day. I imagine there's a sense of cultural pride that they have. And so they would have looked at him as an outsider, without any question, a 6'2" black man in, feudal Japan. There's no way that he would have been considered one of them right off the bat, or even after 15 months of being there. So it says, Japanese historian Yuichi Goza speculates that Yasuke was not a samurai, as video game developer Ubisoft has claimed, but was rather just Oda Nobunaga's bodyguard and entertainer. In an interview with Japanese website The Senkai Shimbun, with translation via DeepL, Goza, who's a faculty member of the International Research Center for Japanese Studies focusing on Japanese medieval history, and the author of What is a Samurai, was asked, what kind of person was Yasuke, and was he a samurai or not? Goza responded, there are very few historical records about Yasuke, so it's difficult to say. The history of Yasuke has not been the subject of much research, in part because the history of personalities is not the mainstream of historical studies. And I think if the translation there is accurate, it's a very interesting way to phrase it. Essentially, it's like, well, we don't really know anything about this guy, his history, where he necessarily came from, his familial lineage. We don't know anything about his educational training or any sort of skills that he brought with him, other than it's reported in some of the writings that I guess he could make art or something, like he was artistic, and, Oda Nobunaga was fascinated with his dark skin. It says, in the 15-volume Nobunaga Koki, in the collection of the Sankai Kakubunko, which is one of the biographies of Nobunaga Koki, a chronicle of Nobunaga's life, there is a description of Nobunaga giving Yasuke a sword in a house, indicating that he treated him as a samurai. However, this is something that only appears in the biography among the dozens of manuscripts of the Nobunaga Chronicle, and we cannot deny the possibility that it was added later when the manuscript was translated, which is a very, very big red flag in my opinion, because remember, just like what we've seen with a lot of the modern translations and localizations that we've seen in the manga or anime or even the video game industry, where they take things and twist and distort the meaning of the original words to fit a more modern narrative. Goza continued, also, even if he was a samurai, he may have been a formality. For example, in the Edo period, feudal lords who were fond of sumo had their own personal wrestlers. Formerly, they were treated as vassals or samurai and allowed to wear a sword, but even if a war broke out, it was not expected that the feudal lords would allow their retainers to fight on the battlefield. Which, again, I think really kind of ties into the idea that when the writings that they do have say, oh yeah, Nobunaga was killed, and another samurai told Yasuke, don't fight, give me your sword, you're not a real samurai, you can't commit seppuku, and all this other stuff. And then another samurai told him essentially, or another warlord said, no, don't, just send him back to the Jesuits, he's an animal. They did not treat him or respect him the way that they would any other samurai at the time. When asked about the magnificent armor that Ubisoft depicts Yasuke wearing in Assassin's Creed Shadows and what position he actually held under Nobunaga, Goza responded, the Japanese people around Nobunaga were very surprised by Yasuke's dark skin and seemed to be interested in it. In a sense, it was a show, and having a black man like Yasuke so close would attract attention and, in a sense, show off Nobunaga's power. So guys, think about it this way. Yasuke probably was more like a museum piece, more of a flex for Nobunaga. And from what I've read, I've seen some writing saying Nobunaga was also Western, like obsessed with the West. Like he dressed like apparently in Western clothing and liked to collect Western things. I could be wrong. If somebody knows, like if one of the Japanese people watching this knows, maybe you can fact check me in the comments. But I've seen writings talking about how Oda Nobunaga actually had a proclivity, sort of a liking for Western clothing and different styles and art and all sorts of stuff. In a sense, Nobunaga could show off his, quote, power, therefore I believe that the most important purpose was to show off to everyone. In the Jesuit historical records, it is written that Yasuke was powerful and could do a few tricks. I believe that he was, in fact, Nobunaga's bodyguard and entertainer. So again, the idea is you have a gigantic black man in feudal Japan around a bunch of tiny little Japanese people. Let's be honest. I mean, I'm a short man, but I'm probably average in Japan right now. So the reality is he probably stood out like a sore thumb. And as far as physical strength goes, there's no question that he probably exhibited far superior physical strength to your average Japanese person at that time. But that being said, it seems like, according to this historian, he was treated as nothing more than a showpiece, nothing more as a flex by Nobunaga to say, look at this cool thing I have following me around. And of course, I'm sure he was intimidating given the fact that he was far taller and bigger and stronger than the average Japanese person. So I'm going to leave it right there, guys. Let me know what you think about all this. I apologize for not getting to the live stream last night. I was in computer hell and had a really long day. So hopefully we might do like an impromptu live stream later tonight, Tuesday night here. So maybe I'll see some of you guys there. In the meantime, make sure you check out Meta PCs if you're in the market for a top-of-the-line gaming PC. They've got lots of options to choose from between custom and pre-built. Use my link down below and code TBO for a cool discount, and I will check you guys later. Alright, and if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching the video. Thank you for being here. I do have 2 channels, Minimal Effort Podcast, as well as my gaming channel. I do have a Twitch and Kick for my gaming channel. We do live streams over there occasionally, maybe once a week. And then if you are in the market for a new PC, make sure to check out Meta PCs. Click the link I have down below. Use code TBO at checkout for a special discount. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.